Direct from the Six, world-renowned, Canada's largest city, with Canada's biggest thinkers, visionaries, and hustlers. This is Startup Talk, featuring the founders, funders, innovators, and community leaders who've led Canada's startup ecosystem right here in Toronto. You'll hear the challenges, the failures, the successes. Toronto's Startup Podcast gives you the full story direct from the entrepreneurs and influencers who've made a difference. Now, the host of Startup Talk, the founder of TorontoStarts, the Startup Coach.
What are some of the best inbound strategies that you would recommend?
Yeah, I think obviously companies, a lot of people are living on LinkedIn these days, right? So it is what it is, whether you're for or against that. There's kind of the building the company in public. I definitely think that's something that any company should be active on LinkedIn. Definitely think, the founder needs to kind of be that persona, kind of building that company in public as well as the employees. I think it was Gong did a case study, and they were saying how whenever Gong releases something on LinkedIn, every single employee reposts that, and you see it, right? When they release a new feature, you're getting bombarded, and that's completely free, right? So again, from what I understand how kind of the algorithms work, obviously the more engagement is going to get promoted as well too. I think an underrated tactic is referrals, and I know that's hard. I know that's very, very good. We're hesitant to ask for a referral. But, I think that if you can, say you're on the CX side, or say you have a bunch of very happy customers saying, listen, is there anyone else you can recommend that would benefit from this? Right? So then you can, dangle a discount in there, or maybe you get, the first month free or something. I truly believe if you have an amazing product and you're actually achieving impact with your customers, that referral motion can work, especially early on. I'm a big fan of, being where your customers are. And these days, a lot of times it is conferences, right? Being in there. And again, being able to run into people in the coffee shop lineup, right? You wouldn't normally come across, right? So again, sort of spreading out, getting back to that more traditional in person, definitely are a couple strategies I think that could work.
In person, there's still no match for it. I run a lot of in-person events, networking events and whatnot. And the value of meeting someone face-to-face and talking to them is completely different than the online and everything else. So definitely get out there and do that. It's probably the biggest way you're going to make sales. Now, you mentioned referrals. And I work with a few of the B&I groups in Toronto, and they're all based on referrals, which is great. So if you fit into that mode, joining a group like that where every week they're getting and giving referrals to each other, that is obviously worth its weight in gold. Are there other groups or other things people should do in that vein?
In terms of referrals, I think it's just staying really close to your customers. I know definitely from my experience, when you have customers who really get value out of their product, they're willing to introduce you, right? If they're not willing to introduce you, well, maybe that's a bit of a red flag. Maybe they're not getting the value out of the product, right? So I even think with a few customers, you can get a lot of referrals, and especially the ones that are getting the value, and the ones that aren't, maybe they're not going to be the best fit for your company.
Yeah, and if you're just starting out, sometimes you want those referrals, you want that testimonial. Sometimes you'll have to do something out of the ordinary, do it for free, do it for trade. I'm doing something right now with a couple of co-founders, and we're doing a co-founder prenup. And I said, you know what? I'm going to reach out to this lawyer I know and say, hey, will you look at this and kind of make sure we're on the right track and all that stuff? And in return, we're going to do X, Y, and Z for you for free. And hopefully that'll work out well because we'll get a customer/testimonial referral plus some free legal work, and it's a win all around. So it's just being creative sometimes, especially when you're starting out.
Yeah, I think too, maybe taking a bit of a step back, really, really honing in on your ICP or your ideal customer profile. Right. I think that's where a lot of startups are. And I understand why. You're obviously trying to get funding, right? You're trying to get customers, right? So, hey, our ICP is here. Right? Maybe we'll just kind of, move over here because we might be able to get some services work in the interim or some consultant work in the interim. So again, I think if you are providing good value to a very specific ideal customer profile, right, you can speak very intelligently to the industry and the problems that they're having. I think that definitely helps your referral motion. Because again, we've all done that broken telephone, right? Someone's trying to refer you, they can't actually articulate the value that you provide, right? So again, if you really hone in on that ideal customer profile, make it very easy for that person referring you to clearly articulate the value that they're getting out of your product or service, and that's definitely going to help your motion.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely stay in your lane. In my scenario, we would be staying in our lane for what we're doing. I wouldn't be, going to, hey, a grocery store and let me do this for you, but I'm looking for lawyer clients or what have you. It doesn't make sense. So yeah, you got to stay in your lane and understand the target market. And it gives you a chance to test the target market because maybe, it's not what you think. And I've seen recently, especially, there are schools of thought that says you shouldn't be laser focused on your ideal client ICP super early because you really don't know. So you need to be a little bit more generic. And then as you progress, you kind of narrow it down because you get those signals that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. I think another thing to add as well, too, an idea that just came up, I think Salesforce does this very well, is they celebrate those customer use cases or those customer case studies, but with the focus on the actual customer, the actual person, right? They don't make it about the company the person is working for, they make it about that person. So again, if I was a startup and I had a great use case from my ICP, I would put something up on social around that person and what they were able to achieve. That could be a LinkedIn post, it could be a podcast you're doing with them, that could be, a short YouTube snippet, right? Again, kind of all these things that are relatively inexpensive, but again, focusing on that person, because then potential customers that research the company say, hey, that person reminds me of me, right? That person is a production manager at a cement manufacturer. That person is a head of sales at a 50-person, sales org, right? So again, I think really honing in on that ICP, making it about that person as opposed to their company can definitely help you relate a bit more to prospective customers.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. A lot of things I focus on when I'm talking to startups because most of them don't know what they're selling. And I focus on the transition principle. You're selling, point A to point B most of the time. So that's a great example. Focus on the person. This is what it was like before, and this is, what it's like now. Look at me saving hours of time, or life is great now.
Then you're going to have a champion for life, right? That person is a lot more in public on the podcast, right? So, I think, very, very important. I think very few people would turn down the opportunity to be publicly acknowledged with the company, especially if they're ambitious and up and coming.
And don't forget to ask, right? You don't get testimonials. You don't get these things unless you ask people, and you always got to follow up. It's funny. I had this one thing for my growth hacking course that I don't teach anymore, but I used to. The one testimonial was the one student earned $78,000 in 2 weeks with one tip from my class. And it was great. And what it was this real estate agent who did what I told him to do. He took one tip and he sold the house within 2 weeks with that tip, and it made him $78,000. He's like, okay, this goes to starting up is like, if you're startups don't charge enough. So which becomes the problem. If you're only charging $50 or $20 a month for your product and you're, doing all this searching on LinkedIn and all these sales enablement strategy, you're losing so much money along the way. So you really need to start thinking about stop charging $50 a month and start charging $500 a month and give the white glove service. Like, we're not just giving you this tool. We're going to implement it for you. We're going to give you the reports. We're going to do all this so that when you're done, it's set up. And we can afford to have the support structure to do that. Your customer is going to be so much more happier than the person who's frustrated at $50 a month, can't get what he wants out of the system. What are your thoughts on that approach?
Yeah, I think I forget who did this study. It was the guys from the Jolt effect around not FOMO, but FOMO. So what prevents a lot of customers from buying is that FOMO, that fear of messing up. So to your point, where especially early on, you're kind of an unproven startup, right? But if you can, again, give that white glove service, de-risk the deal for, the decision maker, right? Again, that could be extra support, that could be going on site, that could be, hey, you can call me anytime, you're an early customer, right? I think definitely helps them make that buying decision.
Any last words? And then where can people go to find out more, follow you and all you do?
I think we've covered a lot, Craig. And people can find me on LinkedIn. I certainly live there a lot these days. So please feel free to reach out. Happy to chat sales, enablement, go-to-market, scaling, very interested in the space.
And those links will be in the podcast show notes or on YouTube a little later today. So when you're watching that, if you want to find Graeme, just check the podcast show notes and you'll be able to find that link. Thank you very much for taking the time today. It was really insightful.
Thanks, Craig.
This has been Startup Talk, Toronto's startup podcast. For more exclusive content, the episode vault, and to be part of TorontoStarts community, visit TorontoStarts.com. Get your name on the newsletter mailing list and check out our upcoming events. For more episodes, subscribe now. And please recognize the time and work behind the scenes put into connecting you with the biggest visionaries, entrepreneurs, and innovators in Toronto by leaving a 5-star review. Join us for more next episode from Toronto's most active entrepreneur and startup community on Startup Talk.